for our viewers who may not be as aware, can you tell us the genesis of this radical ideology of Wahhabism and how it's affecting the security around Asia?
Well, look, Wahhabism was the creation of a gentleman called Abdul ibn al-Wahhab. And frankly, he had very good relations with individuals in the British military, etc. I'm not going to go into conspiracy theory that Wahhabism was invented by the British. I don't believe that. It was invented by Mr. Abdul Wahhab himself. But the point is, it's only a few hundred years old, about 300 odd years old. And it's a very exclusivist supremacist creed. Now, the British found it very helpful to them during, for example, their efforts to cleanse the Arabian continent of the Turkish influence, the Turkish Caliphate, because Wahhabism taught that we are the only true Muslims, that any kind of Islam, and the Turks were much more moderate. At least, it was before the days of Erdogan, much before that. And this kind of Islam is not our hardline, hardcore Islam is the real Islam, which I don't believe is true at all. The Muslim world is overwhelmingly, in my view, not Wahhabi, and is overwhelmingly open. It is to modernism and is overwhelmingly moderate. Thank God for that. But I'd like to say that the British used Wahhabism against, if I may say so, the Turks very successfully. And with the help of this fanatic creed, the Arabs were helped by the British to drive out the Turks, number one. Number two, the Americans saw the value of this. Why? Because Arab nationalism was growing. You had Gamal Abdel Nasser, you had Syria, you had different countries, you had Iraq. All these big, powerful Arab countries wanted to come together. And in fact, for a time, they even created something called the United Arab Emirates. And they tried to create a kind of a universal, moderate brotherhood based on moderate values, a country, a common country. And this was very scary to the Americans. They thought it'll affect Saudi Arabia and the Sheikdoms, which frankly, they were very, very, very important for them from the point of view of the oil that they produced. So Wahhabism was then used by them to essentially delegitimize these nationalist leaders. The propaganda was spread that they're not really, Muslims in the proper sense of the word. I mean, certain Nasser and others who are Arab patriots, strong patriots, and who are extremely staunch Muslims. The perception was Arabs, whether it's in Nasser's Egypt or in Iraq or in Syria or other places, this was spread. Oh, these are not the true believers of the faith. And unfortunately, that was accepted by many people. Wahhabism spread its roots in a lot of locations. And as a consequence, the nationalist leaders were one by one weakened and by one way or the other toppled and replaced. So it served their interest. It again served the interest of the coalition that was correctly formed after the Soviet invasion. The Soviets made a huge blunder in invading Afghanistan, and it was good that they were defeated. But the problem was that the Americans chose Pakistan, Pakistan military. And the Pakistanis chose the extremist Pashtun over the moderate Pashtun. The moderate Pashtuns were in the majority. They could have been armed, equipped, and they would have, defeated the Russians much quicker. But Pakistan did not want moderate Pashtuns because moderate Pashtuns are nationalists, patriots. Many of them don't recognize this Durand line. So they felt that their Durand line is safe only with the extremist Pashtuns. And so they only empowered the extremist Pashtuns. And of course, those extremist Pashtuns also dealt very summarily with moderate Pashtun leaders, and many of them were eliminated. But as a consequence, the rise of extremism accelerated. And you're seeing the effect. In Afghanistan, you're seeing the effect of the Taliban. The Taliban was ushered into office by President Clinton. Let's be honest. And his Assistant Secretary of State, Robin Raphael, worked tirelessly to promote the Taliban. Tirelessly, as did Khalilzad during that time. I think he was working for an oil company. And of course, history has repeated itself. I mean, when history repeats itself twice over, one has to question the fundamental wisdom of those leading a country. Because once I can understand, but you repeat a mistake twice, that's what they did again. Donald Trump did that at Doha, and the very next year, this year, that Joe Biden followed suit. So I'd like to say Wahhabism was useful to the British, to the Americans, to the project of dominating the colonial world, even after technically colonialism had disappeared, and keeping nationalism at bay. It's good to be an American nationalist.
Right.
It's good to be a French nationalist. It's good to be a German nationalist, be a patriotic German. It's not good to be a patriotic, Indian, if I may say so. It's not good to be a patriotic, Asian. It's not good somehow. How is that? How do you legitimize patriotism in yourself and then you delegitimize patriotism in others because patriotism was inconvenient to you? You understand? But this fanatic religion, creed, this fanatic sect of a great religion was extremely convenient to you. This effort to kind of remake the religion, in the shape of Wahhabism, that was initiated by Abdul Wahab and continued. And then, of course, it took on speed when the Saudi royal family, the Al Sauds, and the Wahab family formed a matrimonial alliance. And the Al Sauds began to use Wahhabism for purposes of their own power and their own, if I may say so, domination over the people that they ruled. So that took off. But today, fortunately, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is the first Al Saud, Mohammed bin Salman, the first Al Saud to move away from Wahhabism and to openly say Wahhabism is not the future, it's the past. I think that is something for which he deserves more praise than he's got. And he's trying to move Saudi Arabia away from that. He has to succeed, because if he does not succeed, I can tell you, it's a very young country. The Middle East is a very young location of very young people. And the only way that they can be saved, the world can be saved, is that they go into modern industry, they go into modern ways of thinking, and for that they have to abandon Wahhabism completely. So Wahhabism is a hindrance. Islam is not a hindrance. Islam, very frankly, in its very beginning, encouraged learning, and it spread across the world like many parts of the world. It also promoted learning and books, etc., etc. But subsequently, Wahhabism does not promote learning except rote learning, and they have, in a sense, so much, influenced so many the interpretations of so many texts that the interpretations are completely different. And I would like to, just end this segment by saying, in every religious text of every religion, even whether it's Hindu or Christian or Jewish or Muslim, you find references to violence. You have that in all the texts, but nobody says violence is at the core of the personality of the Hindu,
right,
or at the personality of the Buddhist, or at the personality of the Christian. But unfortunately, Wahhabism has been identified as representing Muslims because of all these centuries of legitimization of Wahhabism. The world believes that this is actually the creed, that everything else is not pure, the pure creed. This is the pure creed. And many textbooks will tell you, oh, this is the pure creed. It is not, frankly. But unfortunately, this legitimization led to this radicalization. And unless the world rids itself of this radicalization, neither the Muslim community, 1.5 billion strong, will be secure and stable, nor will the rest of the world.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content and to support our work, please visit citti.net. धन्यवाद. Namaskar.